Mr. Speaker, will you please call the House to order?
The bill is passed.
We'd like to get a budget that represents the interests of the people who are standing here with me now.
To be part of the struggle to achieve a better society for all.
Hello everyone, it's Assemblymember Ron Kim. It's almost been 2 years since the deadly March 25th, 2020 executive order by the former governor of New York, who sent thousands of nursing home positive COVID patients to unprepared facilities where many have died unnecessarily. To commemorate this moment and to honor those deaths, we have introduced legislation called the We Care Remembrance Day. Today, I'm joined by dozens and dozens of resident nursing home victims' families who came up to Albany to advocate for that bill, along with a number of other policies that will rectify the situation and also fight for justice for the nursing home victims moving forward to make sure that we have transparency, honesty, and accountability in what happened so we don't make the same mistakes again. Today, our first guests are the sisters who have started the Voices for Seniors, and I'm proud to call them my friends who have shared many moments with the last couple of years, and they'll be talking about specific policies that they want to focus on in Albany. Vivian, so tell us more about how you started this and what are the policies that you're trying to get across in Albany.
Well, thank you for having us not only here, but thank you for fighting with us for the past almost 2 years. We've lost our mother, my sister and I, and we had no idea how to go forward after her loss, especially when we, our legal recourse at the time was basically taken away from us. We've been fighting just for answers so that no family endures the pain we have. But during the way, we've uncovered that there's been a lot of other issues, like not just the death of COVID-positive patients, but also the people who died of the isolation, of failure to thrive, and abuse or neglect. So we've come a long way in our 2 years learning, how to protect our loved ones, but at the same time, getting accountability for our loved ones' deaths.
Great. Yeah, please tell us more about your journey and how you're turning your grief into action. I know that every time you share your story, it's emotional. It's almost been exactly 2 years since your mother's death. There's a lot of trauma, but you have the courage to turn your trauma into tangible action. So tell me more about what it is that you want to see out of Albany this session.
Well, this journey has been eye-opening as well as hard. We see that getting new laws passed and protections for the seniors going forward is really hard. We just want to see that our legislative officials put new laws in place that will protect the seniors going forward, that the amount of seniors that died during this pandemic does not happen again. The number is excessive. Things could have been done differently to protect them. We understand that COVID was quite deadly in the beginning, but should different policies be put in place going forward, it would eliminate that number being high going forward. And we also realize that there's a lot of laws that are presently in legislative that are not enforced enough to have the actual protections be put in place where they're not left at the mercy of nursing aides or short staffing or things of that nature.
Yeah, and Vivian, you mentioned that the state took away patients' right to recourse, and you're referring to what the former governor did in setting a near blanket legal immunity in the budget 2 years ago. Mm-hmm. It took away people's rights, the patients' rights and the residents' rights. Not only that, he also made it almost impossible to collect evidence because he waived medical record keeping for almost a year and banned family members like you to visit these facilities. Correct. So why is it so important now that we fight to extend the statute of limitations, especially at a time when it's hard for people to even collect the basic evidence to prove negligence. Do families need more time right now to collect the necessary evidence if there was negligence in these facilities to file their civil lawsuits?
Part of the family's rights is visitation and legal recourse if something goes wrong. And those rights were stripped from families. So how do families, we were injured more than in one way. We were injured by being locked away from our family members, powerless to do anything about their physical outcome. And then when everything happened, we find out to our surprise that then now we have no legal recourse and that no attorney would take our cases or even look into the cases. And on top of that, the fact that we were locked out to get any evidence to prove if there was wrongdoing. So, and this didn't happen just to my sister and I, it happened to thousands of families in our state. So, you know, we have an opportunity here to rectify that.
Right, and if we do not extend the statute of limitations, their right to record, their time period to hold these facilities accountable will expire soon, correct?
Correct.
So
there's a lot of families that their loved ones contracted COVID out in their facility and then were transferred home. We're still fighting to get those numbers, you know, accurately reflected. But, you know, what if they want to sue? You know, they're still going through a lot of other red tape to even know if their numbers are accurate, if their loved ones are counted. So everything is slow in Albany, and we figure that we need more time. We need more time to be able to unravel what happened and then how to go forward to rectify it.
Right, and unfortunately, when the state and the government fails to protect our loved ones in these facilities, our loved ones' right to the courts and recourse is the only last protection that they have. Mm-hmm. So we need to restore, strengthen, and give every opportunity for the families to find their closure by collecting the evidence and filing civil lawsuits if they choose to hold these facilities accountable. So we should be extending the statute of limitations to give families ample period of time, and hopefully we can get done very soon for you guys.
We hope so too.
Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. We're now back with families who are visiting Albany, who lost their loved ones in nursing home facilities during COVID. And now I'm joined by my very good friend, Janice Dean, who I've got very close to over the last 2 years to focus on finding justice and truth and accountability for these families. Janice, welcome to Albany.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's nice to be in your room now.
Well, you know, you've been such a persistent fighter. I know we met around October, I believe, of 2020, mm-hmm. and you're one of the very few first advocates who lost your loved ones that did not give up. They were so active and used your platform and your regular job to make sure these families had a voice. So I want to first thank you mm-hmm. for everything you've done so far, but the fight is just beginning.
Right, 2 years in. March 25th, 2020 was the first day that we found out our loved ones weren't being taken care of, and to find out 2 years later that 9,000 COVID positive patients were put into their homes without us knowing, to find out that for so many months, as the governor was celebrating himself and writing a $5.1 million book, he was covering up the numbers by at least 50%. And we had the Attorney General, Tish James, come out with her report in January of 2021, and now we have Tom DiNapoli's report that has also come out to say that there was wrongdoing and there was a cover-up.
Right, and there was a third independent investigation as well by the Bar Association. So there's been 3 independent investigations that verified that the former governor did wrong during COVID. Now, people have attacked you. People have come after you saying you are being political, you're making an issue out of nothing for no reason. But so let me reframe the entire discussion. If the former governor had come out in May of 2020 and told the public and told our families, I made a mistake and I'm sorry, this was something that should not have happened, we're going to rectify the situation right away, would you still have been upset with the former governor?
No, and I've said that on the record. And I actually, in the beginning of COVID, I thought he was doing a good job. I went on social media and actually said that, that he was doing a great job. But when I found out that he was actively trying to hide wrongdoing, and had he come out in the very beginning and said all of the things that you did, like a human being, and said, I made a mistake and I will spend the rest of my career trying to right this wrong. If he had written condolence cards instead of written a $5.1 million book, if he had met with some of the families, I would have forgiven him. And we wouldn't be here today.
Right. I think most of us, it doesn't matter what political ideology you're from, would have forgiven him. It was an emergency. No one knew exactly what they're doing. You were allowed to make certain mistakes. But the fact that he lied about it and he tried to cover it up, he tried to cover up the cover-up,
Yes.
multiple cover-ups.
Yes.
And that led to his downfall ultimately, is why we're so upset about not only him, the Department of Health, and the lack of integrity and accountability in our state government.
That's right.
So why is it so critical to go back? I know the current administration, the current commissioner have said we need to move forward, and let's focus on getting the state to move forward. But why is it so important to look back and get the truth and understand what went wrong?
Well, I go back to what I do and what I was attacked for, the meteorologist over at Fox News, and they said, well, it's her politics, it's where she works, she's just a dumb weather person. But when you look at what I do as a profession, we forecast storms. That's what I've been doing for 20 years now, is forecasting storms, and part of a good meteorologist's job is to go back at the bad storms and find out what went wrong so that when the next storm comes, we are prepared. And why aren't we doing that with what happened in our nursing homes? Why aren't we investigating what went wrong? Why were thousands of infected patients put into where our most vulnerable resided? Even the former governor knew that the elderly were going to be affected, like fire through dry grass. He said that before he implemented that March 25th order, before he lit the match. We have to investigate what went wrong to make sure that this doesn't happen again. And it's still going on in nursing homes right now. So, we are just uncovering the rot underneath the floorboards of these nursing homes.
Right. So we have a bipartisan bill. We've introduced it. You were up here 2 years ago to introduce the bill with us, and it's still pending. And it's about time we get to the truth. We pass this bill and make sure that all the families that do not have a voice understand what happened. And to your point, we do not repeat the same mistakes moving forward.
We can't. They can't have died in vain, Ron. Your uncle can't have died in vain. He served this country. My father-in-law was a FDNY member for 23 years, and he also served with the U.S. Air Force. And we have to treat our elderly with dignity and respect. They are our greatest generation.
Right, and to that point, if we do not act, if we just erase them out of our history, we are normalizing ageism.
Yes.
We're normalizing ageist violence. It's telling others in the future that it's okay to treat older people as disposable human beings, and that is not right. So it's not just about Andrew Cuomo anymore. It's not just about the politics or whatever people want to blame this on. It's about accountability so we don't repeat the same mistakes. And to do that, we need to hold the former governor fully accountable to get to the truth.
And our health department as well.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
Janice, I appreciate you, and I appreciate our continuous partnership. I look forward to getting to the truth and accountability.
I do too, Ron. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Janice. Hi, everyone. We're back with our final guest who came up to Albany to advocate for nursing home victims. Peter and Daniel Albany have worked tirelessly from the beginning of the COVID tragedy to make sure that not just their families, but so many other families who did not have a voice or a seat at the table had proper advocacy and representation. Through their work, they worked directly with Attorney General James's office, State Controller DiNapoli's office, to make sure that they were doing their job to report the accurate data and the facts of what happened. As a result, recently, State Controller Tom DiNapoli issued his audit of the nursing home time period, which again, for the third time, independent investigation had concluded that the former administration suppressed life and death information, and this time the Department of Health was directly called out by the Controller's office. We would not have reached this point if it wasn't for their advocacy. So I'm so grateful that this family has turned their grief, anger, and frustration into tangible action. So I want to turn it over to Peter and Daniel to talk about what's driving them, what's their motivation, and what do we need to do next?
I was very unfortunate to lose my father.
but I was very fortunate to meet with the top three branches of government. I handed Governor Hochul my father's death certificate and asked if it counted. I handed it to Tish James and asked if it counted. I handed it to Tom DiNapoli and asked if it counted. I still haven't gotten an answer, and you can't get any higher than that. So we have advocated, because my father died at home after being discharged from the nursing home, we have advocated that there has to be a re-audit, that the number is not 15,000. And I've had Tish James say that the numbers aren't correct. Tom DiNapoli, thank you for your wonderful report. That says the numbers aren't correct. And we have some movement with Governor Hochul feeling that maybe there should be a recount.
And why is the recount and the audit so critical for families like yours? Is it personal that the state is not as responsive in answering some of your most basic questions? It's my understanding that you can't just go ask someone whether your father's death was counted in a nursing home facility. It is a very foundational, basic question. We can't even do that. Is that correct?
It is correct, but we know for a fact that Governor Cuomo was not counting anybody that was discharged and went home, and that passed shortly after. So that number is uncounted, even unlooked at. So we need answers, we need the truth, we need accountability.
And Daniel, I know that you and Peter have also very focused on the July 2020 Department of Health report.
Yes.
Which was very flawed, politicized, and it was meant to, as the comptroller pointed out, to follow an executive narrative, not a scientific health narrative they wanted to push, but they had to follow orders from the governor's office. You both are calling for them to take down the report and correct the report with accurate numbers. Why is this so important?
That is correct. Well, it's so important for a number of reasons. Personally, it opens up the actual underpinnings of what we as New York State didn't do to protect our most vulnerable and our loved ones. If we're reporting, as our former governor used to brag, how we were doing so well and it was a complete lie and sham, which we called out, but we had no facts for it, it helps us personally understand that we were right and we need to advocate for our father. But we're talking 15,000 deaths. There are 100,000 plus family members, New York State family members that are grieving. We need to understand what we did wrong. And it starts with just the simple facts. What happened? Who was it? How many? And then you can understand what could we do better. We can't let this happen again, Ron. We cannot let this happen
There's
again.
one point I'd like to make about the July 6th report. Even though that even today it's still on the DOH website listing the death toll as 6,500. So it is still factually incorrect. But in Tom DiNapoli's report, they point out that what health department report uses the appendix from the New York Times. They quote a New York Times article. That is not what a government report is supposed to be. It wasn't a government health report during a pandemic. It was a politically motivated report. That's why it has to be corrected.
Yeah, and I would also point out that the comptroller's report also directly points out the incompetence of the former administration and their inability to manage this crisis.
Absolutely.
And for a long time, he had this brand that he was the ultimate manager, that he was a doer. And I wanted to believe that so badly at the beginning of COVID. And as you know, when COVID started, I sponsored legislation to give him power and money to get ahead of this. Because I had assumed that this was his moment. This is Action Cuomo. He is the manager that can take care of this. And so many of us wanted to believe that. But starting starting March 25th and until April, the near blanket immunity and the false report and the book deal and the cover up, it was never ending.
And the threats.
And right. Yeah, and how disappointed are you in our inability to have proper check and balance in our state government?
I think that it was a failing we lived it with our father, that it was a failing between the federal, the state, and the city. It wasn't just a failing of the state, It was these three major branches of government that failed to communicate. And I've often thought about how could this, doesn't matter who's the president or who's the mayor or who's the governor, how do we, in the future, no matter what the elected officials are, how do we prevent this? And I've suggested that we should have something like the Terrorist Task Force, where that works through multiple agencies and it communicates. Why don't we have a natural disaster pandemic to put, so it doesn't matter who's in office. So it doesn't matter if they don't get along. It doesn't matter if they're narcissistic.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, it's a failure at all three of those levels. Yeah. If New York City, our former mayor, would have said, this is wrong, don't follow these directions, it would have changed everything. Did he? No.
Yeah. You know, the federal government gave the former administration a ton of money back in 2014 to prepare exactly what you're saying.
Yes.
Here's a pot of money, and you need to prepare how to deal with natural emergencies like a pandemic and deal with specifically hospital and nursing home surges. What are you going to do? And they didn't do anything with that money. We have no idea how that money was spent. So they were ill prepared, but what they did know was that nursing homes did not have the equipment, didn't have the resources to handle 9,000 COVID positive patients, but he pulled that trigger anyway. And instead of being honest and being contrite and admitting there was a mistake and calling families like yours directly himself to apologize, which is to this day he refuses to do.
Correct.
He covered it up, lied everything, and committed, in my opinion, fraud. You can't suppress public data that leads to more deaths. That's, in my opinion, criminal fraud. And that's what he did, and that's why I think he needs to be held accountable to make sure that we never make the same mistake forward. I thank you so much, Arbeny brothers, for your consistent and persistent advocacy. We have a long ways to go, but the Justice League, as you like to,
Nursing Home Justice League.
Nursing Home Justice League will get us there. I appreciate you.
Thank you.